How do you crochet an entire reticule from 3 lines of instructions? Apparently you go looking for the rest of the pattern, because Edwardians are wacky that way. Good day, friends. It probably comes as no surprise that I love a good mystery. I also love craft and textile history. I came across a really gorgeous crocheted handbag in an antique crochet magazine on antiquepatternlibrary.org, and I was ready to order some crochet thread and get started, but it's only 3 lines. It tells you how to make the central motif, the circle in the middle with the ridged lip. The rest of the pattern comes down to follow the pattern, which is extremely vague. There's no way you can follow the pattern as written to get the result pictured. I was wondering if maybe there was an extra pattern page that was omitted or lost from the book, but the back cover kind of answered my questions. The large clear plates, which show each stitch, permit the least experienced crocheter to satisfactorily complete her work and makes copying from them a delightful pastime. I've gone over the extremely abbreviated history of knitting versus crochet in a past video, but allow me to boil it down even further. At a time when knitters were starting to standardize their directions and abbreviations for ease and clarity, crochet was dithering around on 2 continents. Honestly, this is one of the reasons why I find crochet frustrating. Intriguing, but frustrating. The book was written in St. Louis, Missouri, so I'm going to assume this was written in American crochet terminology. There's just one problem. This is our reference. Pray tell, how is the least experienced crocheter supposed to follow along copying the image plate if all they have to go on is a list of abbreviations and no pictorial reference aside from the bag itself? I now have some vague experience with antique crochet and I'm lost. So we're going to have to find a better solution. I find myself in the fortunate position of not being affected by the eye strain and sundry issues caused by the Ravelry UI change last year. I don't remember if it was a Google reverse image search or just looking for the author Louise Knack's name on Ravelry, but I somehow found myself at a Ravelry project page for a crocheted purse similar to this one. As in, very similar. Someone had commented on it that it looked like the Topaz Purse and should be properly credited to the actual pattern author, Sylvia Landman. This led me to the Topaz Purse. The design is remarkably similar. I'm not showing any pictures because I don't have permission from other Ravelry users to do so. The page for the Topaz Purse states that the pattern of that name is no longer available on Ravelry itself, but it does have a link to Silk Lace Crochet Bag pattern by Sylvia Landman for Krennic. If you get past the advertisements on the page, you'll find the introductory blurb holds the very interesting phrase, "People will think you stole it from your great-grandmother's closet." Indeed. As a weird aside, I think it was during a Google search for the Topaz Purse that I found a diagram someone had made. I've erased the website address watermarks from it because it's pretty obvious someone swiped the diagram from another website and just stamped their own address on it. It's interesting to see it graphed out like this, but not likely something I'll use. A bit more poking around on Ravelry brought me to the Topaz Purse project page of a user by the name of Silk Orchid, who states in the notes section of the page, after hearing a lot about this purse and learning it came from an old 1913 pattern, Royal Society Volume 1, Number 3, Crochet Lessons circa 1913, I thought I'd give it a try. They also include their own debugged instructions for following the pattern, which I'm ignoring for obvious reasons. The important part of that quote, if you missed it, was Silk Orchid's attribution of the pattern to Royal Society Volume 1, Number 3, Crochet Lessons circa 1913. A quick Google search brought me to an Etsy site that was selling the PDF. It was on sale for less than $10, so I purchased it. It's listed under crocheted bag number 1034. I'm going to use the earliest pattern at my disposal and we'll see if I need to incorporate any of the fixes from looking at the pictures or from the pattern on Fave Crafts or Silk Orchid's user notes. At any rate, I'll be putting the full pattern I wind up going with onto my Patreon, because my folks in the bougie pattern weights tier get a little extra stuff, and this purse looks pretty extra to me. Lest one think that Royal Society is a reference to, well, any Royal Society in Britain, it's not. This is a brand name of a mercerized crochet cotton in the US. It states this right in the logo. It's registered in the US Patent Office. The pattern calls for 1 ball of Royal Society crochet thread, any color in size 5, and a size 6 hook, which in US sizing would be 1.8 millimeters. I do not have any size 5 crochet thread, and the last time I was at Michael's, the only crochet thread they stocked that wasn't in teeny balls were sizes 3 and 10. I could have sworn they had 5 at one point, but I haven't seen it since. This sample was crocheted on the number 3. It's a bit cramped, the other one is the number 10. It's just a bit too small. I guess we're ordering some number 5.
Eventually.
Order came in. Managed to find this DMC Petra in a very pretty pink at a super affordable price. I picked up 3 balls. I'm pretty sure the project will only take 1, but I just want to be certain I have enough thread. Having leftover thread is perfectly fine. Not having enough thread, on the other hand, would mean utter failure. I can always use the leftovers in another project, and trust me, I have plenty of ideas. I chose the pink for more than the price because the thread is a nice median shade. It would show the stitches quite nicely, particularly on camera. It's too easy to lose the definition of your stitches when your lights are overexposed or your darks are lost in contrast. Better to go with a nice medium like this rose. So, let's open the packaging and get started. I'm kind of surprised at how well this thing is working up. Having the written instructions really helps though. I've had a few moments where I've referred to the pictures to figure out exactly what they meant, so it's one of those cases where both is good. I'm really enjoying the DMC Petra. It's nice and soft and silky, so it's really easy to work with. This video isn't sponsored by DMC Anchor, by the way. This is just the affordable, pretty number 5 thread that I could find. I feel pretty lucky though, because some of the other threads in my collection are very stiff and not as pleasant to work with. They have more of a sewing thread feel rather than a bougie Edwardian purse feel, if you get what I mean. While Crocheting Mare is doing her thing, how about we talk about the ridicule? Yes, I said ridicule. Keep watching. It seemed like a natural progression from the large waist-tied pockets to the reticule and finally the handbag as we know it. For the most part, this holds true. Bear in mind, none of these are primary sources. I don't claim to be a historian, just an enthusiastic amateur. I checked out JSTOR, J-S-T-O-R, JSTOR, a digital scholarly library, and found an article tracing the evolution of the handbag or purse as we now know it back to the pocket, and before that the coin purse. According to Wikipedia, even Otzi, the prehistoric European man preserved in ice, apparently carried one. According to JSTOR and other sources, when a woman needed to carry more than the contents of her coin purse, she had her pockets, which were well hidden by the panniers and other structural underpinnings of the 18th century. As the silhouette of fashionable clothing changed to the comparatively more form-fitting empire-waisted gowns of the Regency, the contents of the pockets also needed to slim down to a more curated set of items. It was important that the silhouette of your dress not be impacted by the bulk of your pockets. You know, the era's equivalent of the panty line. Thus, women started carrying small reticules and project bags depending on the need. An article I found on the website for the Women's Museum of California quotes, "Bags: An Illustrated History by Caroline Cox." These early handbags were also daring, one of the first examples of underwear as outerwear, and thus for many rather absurd affectation. The same article then goes on to say that, much like the current outcry against pocket inequality in men and women's clothing, early American feminists fought the loss of pockets for women. They believed handbags would never be as practical as pockets and advocated for functional pockets built into women's garments like pockets were for men. For those women, pockets for men and handbags for women became symbolic of the inequality between the sexes and the struggle for women's equal rights, much in the way later feminists would view the bra. So is it backsliding that there's a nouveau cult of the pocket happening in the online costuming community? Or is it just a realization that if we can wear the equivalent of drawers and a corset cover on the streets and call it shorts and a tank top, then wearing a tie-on pocket instead of a crossbody purse or a handbag isn't so scandalous? Talk amongst yourselves in the comments. I'd love to know your opinion on the whole mess. While you're down there, if the spirit moves you to do so, boop that like button. I'm easily amused by watching the numbers go up. Long story short, the reticule then evolved into a more modern-looking handbag when luggage companies found women a profitable demographic. Wikipedia has a story about an entrepreneur who traveled so frequently by rail that he had a traveling case made for his wife as her purse was just too small. JSTOR and the Women's Museum do not recount the same story, just paraphrase the gist of it. Funnily enough, the reticule was also referred to, mostly by satirists at the time, as a ridicule, mostly because the size of the purse was too small for anything but the barest essentials. I concur with this. Having been in the position of carrying small purses in the past, anything more than your bank card, driver's license, and a tube of lipstick makes a reticule-sized purse bulge ridiculously. Per the JSTOR article, mandatory Jane Austen content for escapism purposes. In Jane Austen's Emma, the ridiculous Mrs. Elton carries a purple and gold ridicule. George Cruikshank caricaturized the reticule in his Monstrosities of 1822, depicting fashionably dressed strollers in Hyde Park. Even fashion magazines adopted the pejorative term. The February 1804 issue of the Ladies' Monthly Museum included a fashion plate captioned, "A Kerseymere Spencer, with tippet, purple ridicule." So there's a brief, barely researched history of the purse. Now we know why husbands don't like to go into our handbags. Because it would be scandalous to riffle through a lady's underthings. Folks, you can't make this stuff up. It just writes itself.
One eternity later.
It's subtle, but there's a difference between these two samples. This sample was crocheted using the Royal Society instructions from 1913, This was crocheted using the instructions from the 1913 sample, but with modifications to try and look more like the 1916 knack book. So, what you'll see is that this edge appears longer than this edge, and part of that is due to the fact that it kind of chains into nowhere before going into this edge. On this side, I tried to compensate for that by making another arc, and hence a couple more repeats of the pattern. And as a result, this edge looks a whole lot more symmetrical. This one, on the other hand, is going to block out to be a lot longer on this edge. So the next step, as far as I can tell, is going to be to crochet another one of these, and instead of cutting the thread, what we're going to be doing is attaching this one to the other side. And once we've blocked it, we should be able to get the size of the pouch that we're going to be putting on the inside.
It took a while to figure out the way they join the two halves. I wound up looking at all the resources and finally came to the conclusion that it's basically just chain 2, then single crochet into a picot, and repeat around, alternating which half of the bag you're working into each time. It's deceptively simple, and you'll very quickly find out where you only made 3 picots instead of 4. From here, I just kept following the pattern. The more modern instructions by Sylvia Landman includes beadwork, essentially adding seed beads to the pattern for some extra glitz. I've also seen some folks change up the finishing on the mouth of the purse. Sometimes it's to use various closures or to attach wooden handles. I'm going to stick to the original crochet pattern, but you don't have to if you don't want to. I can understand wanting an alternative. The 22 single crochets per chain 15 arch, of which I had 19, just about broke me. Because as much as I enjoy crochet, I'd also like to do other things, like dishes, or laundry, or my new addiction to Final Fantasy XIV. Now for the structural bag inside the crocheted casing. The only pattern with any instructions on this is the Sylvia Landman pattern on Fave Crafts. I wound up making a really basic pattern by tracing a small plate that fit into the purse and adjusting the fit as I put it together. For the most part, I kept it relatively simple. The outer layer is scraps from my sibling's wedding almost 20 years ago. The inner layer is leftovers from making pockets. Next time I go to the craft store, I'll probably pick up a magnetic snap and stitch it into the opening. So, bag 23, or more accurately, crocheted bag 1034 if we're going by the original instructions. It's a pretty bag. It's big enough to hold a tube of lipstick, your ID and debit card, a packet of tissues, and not much else. Maybe your car key if you can detach it from the rest of the bulky stuff on your keychain. You might be able to squeak your cell phone in there if it's a smaller model. The larger phablet models might not fit. If you're going somewhere fancy though, do you really need much more than that? This isn't a purse purpose-built for carrying around your iPad and your knitting. This purse is going to dinner and she's ordering the lobster. There's something pretty awesome about following and correcting a pattern that's over 100 years old. There's something really powerful in knowing that someone's great-grandmother made one of these. Possibly even your own. Either way, it's like holding a piece of the past in a way that feels just a little more feminine and intimate than even slapping on a corset. This isn't a mass-produced item or a necessary foundation garment, but a little luxury that could be customized by the maker. This is what was left of the single ball I used after the purse and pattern testing. So you could very easily get 2 purses out of 1 ball of thread. Which begs the question, what am I going to do with the other 2 balls of thread?